Brucey here with a new episode of Chordplay. This is the Chords of Booker T and the MGs, and of course we're going to be talking about soul and R&B, music and guitar. And Booker T and the MGs are legendary. They were the house band for Stax Records, and they formed in Memphis, Tennessee in 1962. In their initial run from 1962 to 1971, they were on fire. I mean, they released 11 of their own albums, and then they backed up and did sessions for hundreds and hundreds of hit songs and famous, vocalists and groups, and legendary group. And definitely I had the idea to put this together after the recent announcement that Jim Stewart had passed, the former head of Stax Records. Rest in peace, Jim. And if you're curious about soul and R&B guitar, get ready, because this episode's going to blow your doors open. So if you want to talk about soul and R&B guitar music, you really can't have that conversation without mentioning Steve Cropper. I mean, he's the legendary father of all of this. I mean, there are other R&B and soul guitarists out there, and pioneers for sure, but everybody points to Steve Cropper. I mean, the Stax sessions and the Booker T and the MG albums. I mean, a legend of the guitar. So I'm really excited to finally feature, Steve Cropper, and I'm also very excited to actually feature, my brand new Telecaster too. And I was saving this lesson and a whole bunch of other ideas until I actually had a Tele. And you may discover, if you kind of dive into Steve Cropper's universe and start playing Booker T and the MGs and some Stax songs, you may actually need a Tele just for that snappy and brighter sound. A lot of people don't realize this, but just about every famous, Stax Records soul and R&B song, especially during that 1962 to 1971 time frame, almost all of those hits was Booker T and the MGs, playing the music, and then they had different vocalists, singing those songs. But they literally were the house band for Stax Records for a long time. But here's an image, showing some of the artists and musicians that they worked with and recorded with, for Stax Records. But two members from Booker T and the MGs were actually in the Blues Brothers. They were in the Blues Brothers band, but also in the Blues Brothers movie. And that was Steve Cropper and also the late great bassist Donald Duck Dunn. And they were obviously Booker T and the MGs, alumni, but then they joined forces with Dan Aykroyd and John Belushi and, were musicians in the Blues Brothers band. And that band was phenomenal. I mean, you had Matt Guitar Murphy, Paul Schaefer, Steve Jordan on drums, Tom Scott did some saxophone and stuff. Killer band. And if you're looking for something to watch over the holidays, watch the Blues Brothers. Steve Cropper's in there. Classic movie. But I love this movie. Of course, I'm from Chicago, so this really isn't a movie. This is a documentary. So the music and ideas in this episode actually came from 7 different albums. 3 of those albums are Booker T and the MG's, releases, and then 4 of those albums are famous, soul and R&B songs where Booker T and the MG's, backed up the artists. And, so we're hitting a lot of music in this episode, but we really haven't hit soul and R&B guitar. We've had funk and reggae and classical guitar and some jazz primers and stuff like that. But this is kind of a brand new, territory right here. So here we go. The opening, that's of course the Eddie Floyd classic Knock on Wood, and it's something like this. basically starts with you know, these big ringing chords. It's E major, and then G to A major. And right there, they're just grabbing, or Steve's just grabbing the top part, those partial, you know, bar chords. And I think that's what he's doing in the beginning, but I usually hit that low E in there too, just to fill it out. And then that partial, you know, G to A, and then B, and then D, back to that B, like that. Just let those ring. This, and it's basically starting with A major, and you're doing the thumb wrap right there for the root note, and then you're starting to do this little hammer on right there to that F sharp, like that. So it's A major, but then we're hammering on with your pinky to that F sharp. Let's change it to like an A6 or an A13 implied, like that, and it's real kind of funky and scratchy. Right there, so you're going to basically slide into this little partial A major, back to that G, up to D right there, partial, and then end on that G, and then after that little partial D, you're going to move back to E, like that. So that's tricky. Start kind of vamping that rhythm in E. And you kind of hear like the strum on the top part, and then you hear this little kind of just picking through that chord. And the last time, I came up with something like that, and you hear this little kind of sliding riff, and it's leading you back into that A riff, and that's what I came up with. And then this, right, into that B to D, and then right there you're grabbing F sharp and sliding to G sharp, and that's going to take you back in position to play that A, like that. Guitar part, and check that out the next time you hear it, or just literally, you know, cue it up and listen to it and start playing along. A classic. Next up is the Booker T and the MG's classic Time Is Tight, and if you've ever seen the Blues Brothers movie, then you've heard this song because it's very famous and popular, like this. You're doing this kind of weird C to F thing right there, and you can fret this almost like a cowboy, you know, E major chord, but we're doing it right there on the low E, A, and D. But you're doing this, it's kind of like a C over G thing, and you're doing, and then you just kind of loop that pattern of that riff. So that's weird, because it's like C and E, and then the open strings. And then you're grabbing that C over G right there. You know, it's kind of weird. And do the exact same thing over here, and now it's an F. Like G, you know, to D. Very famous song for sure. Next up is the eternal classic Hold On I'm Comin' from Sam and Dave, and Sam and Dave was great, and a classic song here like this. that. So we got these ringing, you know, major chords. Once again, there's A flat major right there, and then move up to B major, and then D flat major right here, and then back to A flat major, and then I just kind of slid chromatically back into that A flat. Now, actually, what Steve's doing here during the verse, he's really just playing a dyad. You know, real funky and kind of just scratching it. That's definitely played over A flat. And you might be thinking, well, like, what's going on there? That's actually like a little piece of A flat 7 right there. Right? But I just kind of hit that root note just so you could hear the root. Because the bass is actually playing that root note. Then when it changes, and now it's over in D flat, now you're kind of implying a D flat 7. Right there. Really cool and real funky too. I love stuff like that. Next up is the Booker T and the MG song More, and this comes from the album Hip Hugger, and it's really cool like this. Like that. So there's actually a really interesting thing happening chord-wise here in the beginning, because really Steve's just playing this. Just little, you know, like little dyads once again. But he's basically hitting, you know, C sharp major there in the beginning. You know, just hitting this. But that's played over C sharp. And then you hear it change to B flat. So it's like B flat minor. You hear it move over here, and it's like E flat minor, and then it ends up with A flat 7 or A flat major. So there's a chord progression. And that's the bass, you know, playing those root notes, and Steve's just doing that. And then eventually you hear it move up. And then it's C, you know, major to F major. That's just right there. And then you hear this, which is really cool. And really we're just grabbing, you know, B flat minor right there. And you're just descending with that bass note, you know, chromatically, you know, all the way down to that G flat. But, you know, there's some really interesting tonalities kind of hiding in there. It's like a B flat minor major 7 implied. And then just move all the way down to where you got that G flat. That's kind of like a G flat major 7 implied. And then you start hearing this. You know, really cool song, and check out that album. Hip Hugger is awesome. Next up is William Bell's Private Number, which Booker T and the MGs did the session for it. It's really cool, like this. With that first part, it's really cool. You're basically walking in to that C sharp. You know, open A, B, C to C sharp, and then it's, you know, C sharp minor right there, and then B major, and you're kind of playing with the sus4, and then A major, and do that little walk up again. rolling in, you know, that where that B to D flat to E right there. I guess you could think of that as C sharp, B, C sharp to E, and then it ends up on E right there. That's really cool. Next up is the Booker T and the MG song Melting Pot. This comes from the album by the same name, and it's this kind of gradual growing chord riff. It's really cool, like this. Actually the organ that I played down here, and we'll talk about that in a second. But in the very beginning, you just hear this really quiet, it's really just part of an A minor 7, G and C right there. Just the middle two strings right there on the 5th fret, just real quietly. And then you're going to start introducing the A, or I'm sorry, the E right there on the B string. So it's still, you know, A minor 7, but we're just grabbing G, C, and E right there. And then you start hearing that a little bit louder. And then you start hearing this, and that's basically A minor 7, you know, implied, that A, C, and G note. And you definitely hear it a little bit more, you know, kind of accented or whatever. And then you hear Steve sneak up here and grab this B note. That's an A minor 9 implied. You know, really tasty there, and you definitely hear that louder. Eventually you hear the keyboard or organ play, and it goes to F right there. And then it sneaks back into that A minor 7 and A minor 9. But check that song out. If you haven't heard Melting Pot, the album, or that song, that's actually probably my favorite Booker T and the MG's album, because they were just jamming, and it was like, you know, early 70s. Great stuff. Last but not least is one of my favorite songs I think ever, the Staple Singers' I'll Take You There, and Booker T and the MG's did the session for this too. And Steve's guitar part's real sparse, you know, and it's really interesting too. And it's just little pieces and parts of chords. So you definitely hear, like, this is right after the intro and the verse starts. But you hear this, like, bass part, right? Steve just kind of creep in like that, and then he slides it, and then slide that one, and then, you know, something like that. And when you put those parts together, I'm going to loop this with the TC Electronic Ditto looper, you can hear how that fits together like a puzzle, like this. Tasty. So right there, once again, it's all implied chords, right? So that is so cool, because we're basically hitting C. That riff's kind of moving from C to F, right? So that first chord, you know, Steve's very crafty with the way he's kind of hitting these little shapes, because that's basically C major, but he's doing it like that. And then also F major right there after the hammer on. You know, so tasty. And then just kind of like overdo it. And then here. And he slides right there. And then hammers on. You know, talk about soul guitar. And then do the same thing right there. And hammer on. And then you hear him move back here, and that's like a little piece of F right there. You know, classic song. And I love hearing, you know, musicians, whether it's, you know, guitar and bass or two guitars or an entire band, come together and, you know, kind of piece together all these different parts. And you hear this massive, you know, huge sounding song, which is so cool. All right, that's going to wrap this episode of Chordplay with the Chords of Booker T and the MGs, and definitely I'm a huge fan. I love blues and funk and soul and R&B and jazz, and I mean, I love music. I love all styles, rock, metal, classical, Western swing. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff that I really like. But there's something about soul and R&B and Steve Cropper's playing and the music that Booker T and the MGs created. It's organic, it's alive. And yeah, it's not Pro Tools and digitally enhanced or whatever. It's literally like human beings playing instruments, playing guitar, playing drums, sweating and grooving. You know, I love the groove and that kind of swing kind of feel or whatever. And it's kind of kick back. You know, funk is very intense, very rhythmically active. And R&B is kind of more melodic and kind of, I mean, it's very soulful for sure. But soul music and soul guitar, it's kick back, it's grooving, and you just kind of lock in that pocket. I mean, it's very infectious and really fun to play too. So anyway, leave some feedback and comments. Please subscribe to my lessons, and I'll be back before you know it with more content and material. Thank you.